another surprise candidate, in a sense, someone who's making a big impact in a race, is Republican Rick Scott. He was an unknown just a few weeks ago. Well, he's getting known by spending a bunch of money on political ads. Here in the Tallahassee market, you really can hardly turn on the television without seeing Rick Scott. Tell us a little bit about your view about Rick Scott and what progress he's making in his race for
If there's a state, I think, in
governor.
the country that you can make progress running TV ads only, it's Florida. The markets are so disparate, and you could make a big impression with voters. I think the thing we tend to forget living and working in Tallahassee is a lot of these folks that we deal with every day, even those that are in statewide elective offices, they're not all that well known unless they've been in office for an awfully long time or they're governor. In those cases, they are well known. This is a year also where somebody like Rick Scott, and I think David touched upon it with his comments about Bud Child's entry into the race, and that is that there is an anti-incumbent, I think, fervor as well, undercurrent. We'll find out for sure in November. But if there's ever been a time for somebody like a Rick Scott, it's interesting that anybody want to spend that much of their own money to run for the headaches that you're probably going to incur if you do win that job going forward with what's going on around us. But I think there's probably a lot of people think that he may very well be the Republican nominee.
Well, who is Rick Scott? Okay, he's running as a Republican against Attorney General Bill McCollum for the Republican nomination. Who is Rick Scott?
Well, he's a former CEO of a healthcare company, HCA, which before he left the company was under federal investigation for Medicaid fraud. And as soon as he left, the company was, was charged, and it looks as though he left quite conveniently right before the charges mounted. The company paid the largest fine in U.S. history, $1.7 billion, and he has that baggage to overcome. To me, he is forced, he has to spend money because the amount of negative campaigning against him is it's so easy to, say, here we are in a federal health care crisis, and here's a guy who caused some of the trouble. On the other hand, because of this, he is forcing the opponents, Bill McCollum, to have to spend a lot of money and knock him down. And I think that that's where his power lies. It's sort of a negative influence.
What he's going to do in terms of who he is, he's a pretty staunch conservative, and he's already starting to run a campaign that's sort of anti-Obama, which is, considering what has happened to the president in the polls, is a pretty smart move. Even though he's running for governor, a lot of his commercials are about how everything is wrong, including in Washington, and he's somehow going to fix this in Tallahassee. I think a lot of voters may not make that distinction, and I think it's a pretty smart move politically. And he is a conservative who's going to run a little to the right, I think, of Bill McCollum. Bill McCollum is going to be more of a sort of a pragmatist. I've been here. I know how to solve problems, and Rick Scott is going to run kind of as the flamethrower.